The following program is brought to you by Rogers Anyplace TV. Enjoy exclusive content for free. Visit RogersAnyplaceTV.com.
Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm Kathryn Mousseau. This show, we've looked at a lot of books and we've spoken to a lot of authors. And I got thinking, who else does writing? And of course, musicians write. They write songs. And what a great topic to delve into. How do you write a song? And joining me today is Tom Pinsent, our very own songwriter from Grand Falls-Windsor.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
It's really a pleasure to have you. And we're going to talk songwriting today, of all things.
Okay.
And I'm going to pick your brain on your process, because I think we chatted a little, and everyone can have a different process with songwriting, just as they can with writing books. But sometimes there are some things that happen, and we've got a couple of your CDs in front of us, CD 1 and CD 2 there.
Yep.
And those are all original material, are they?
Yes, all original, written last couple of years, actually.
So I think I picked a good guest.
Yes. Okay.
I have picked someone who has done this at least 20 or more times, at least.
Yep.
And we don't know what fell on the floor and didn't make it.
There's a few.
There's a few.
There's a few.
Okay, well, let's really get this started just by saying, how do you write a song? That's a big question.
How do I write a song? As we were chatting earlier, I'm probably going to be a bit of a disappointment. I really don't know how to write a song.
This is going to be a long half hour.
Yes, it's going to be a long half hour. And I say that because I don't think there's one way to write a song. That's one thing I've learned from it, that there isn't just one way. Elton John, for example, he writes a song by, his lyricist sends him a lyric sheet, and he sits and looks at the lyric sheet, and within 15 minutes he can write a song. If it doesn't work within 15 minutes, he throws it away and gets another one. Oh, I can't do that. I couldn't just take a lyric and look at it. It doesn't work that way. It comes to me in a way I've found there's not one way. Sometimes it'll come with a simple line. And one on the first album, and as I've said a few times in an interview, which was Life Goes On, I was driving in a cube van going out towards the East Coast. And I was the radio was busted in it. In hindsight, it was a gift now. And just this line came into me, I tried to write a love song about a girl I never met before. And I thought, that sounds pretty cool. So I had a little sheet, and I wrote it down. So when I wrote it, I started thinking about it, and another line would come to me, and another line would come to me, and then I would start humming it and singing it. And by the time I got to Carbonear, which is where I was headed, I pretty well had it written. But I didn't have a cell phone. I still don't have a cell phone.
We know. We know you don't.
And so I said I was going to stay in St. John's for the night, but I said, I'm going to come back and get this flushed out and put it on something so I don't forget it. And I came back home, and that night was like 2 in the morning by the time I got home, and I picked up a guitar and I put the chord pattern to it and sang it and sang it. And then I wrote it all down again and sang it so many times I actually couldn't sleep until I finally, my wife said, well, this got a memo section on it, why don't you put it on that? And that's how it came, right? And that's I just got it enough that I would remember it. And I still use my wife's phone and an iPad to put, if something comes to me, I will go and I'll put that on it. So that's the way that one came. And then there's been other ones that, just started with a guitar lick, and it just started from that, and you kind of like it, and then you go off and do something. I find with me for writing is more of a relaxation for me. I think everybody has to have something that's just for them. For me, writing songs has become sort of a relaxation. And so in the nighttime is when I do the bulk of my writing. After everybody's gone to bed and everything is settled down, that's when I'll sit down and the ideas will come. But they'll come at weird times too, like you're in the shower, of all places.
No, it's not that uncommon. People sing in the shower. It's great resonance.
Exactly, and it's kind of, I don't ever have a radio on in the shower or anything. So I'm having a shower, and sometimes I don't know how some people do it. For me, there's always a song playing in my head. And some people say you're hearing voices, you're kind of strange. But I hear it, so sometimes like a chorus. Choruses come to me faster than anything else. And, a fantasy became like that. It just came to me in the shower, and I kept humming it. Got out of the shower, went out, got the guitar out, found the chords that I needed to put in it, recorded it onto my iPad, and just left it. And then what happened then, you know, a few nights later, I went back to it and listened to it and said, okay, I like that.
It's got the bones.
Let's see if I can't put, you know, the verses into it. So that eventually became fantasy. So a number of songs will happen like that. Some of them you'll have like bits and pieces of ideas that you will say, okay, here's ideas, and then you'll go, I put them on my iPad. I mean, I swear by the memos on the iPad now, is that if something comes to me, I'll either write down a lyric to it that comes to it, and then I'll record it onto the iPad. And so a lot of times, I'll go back to the iPad a few days later and say, I kind of like that. What exactly was I saying there? What And so it's almost like you start making a cake, and the cake becomes, okay, here's the germ of it. Okay, you start building it, and you start putting the icing on it, and that's sort of how it goes. So there's been number of times now that I've gone, I like that. And there have been a few times that I went, okay, that fits with this idea that I probably recorded 2 weeks ago, and I'll go back and listen to things. Oh, okay. So it's, you know, I don't know if there's a right way to write a song, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and I'm not surprised you would say that. I personally didn't think that you would come out and say this is the way to write a song. I think everyone's journey with that may be a bit different. Although, on the other hand, when I speak to certain people who write, they don't, you know, they'll say, if you read Stephen King's book, it's you get up and every day you must put in 3 or 4 hours and you're going to write. And are there songwriters like that? Like take Diane Warren, for example. She's not a performer.
No.
She writes songs and she's been very successful.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder, does she basically get up and say, okay, I need another song today, I'm going to write a song today?
She seems to be able, and a lot of people who don't know who Diane Warren is, she's written songs on her own, but she's written from everybody from Aerosmith to, everybody.
Everybody.
She seems to be one of the people that is the go-to when they're stuck. They say, well, okay, or even parts of songs, we need you know, to me, that's a gift. I mean, I admire people like that. Paul McCartney is another one of my idols. That just like, it's just, where did you come up with the idea? And so simple that, you know, but it's so good. Those people are just, I think, absolutely phenomenally gifted.
Yeah.
Then there's people like myself who, I got to let it come to me. I can't seem to say, okay, I'm going to churn out something just like that. I just can't do it. It's got to come to me naturally. And if I were to write a portion of something, I'll have a portion to sit there. I can't say, okay, I'm going to sit down now and I'm going to write and until I get this. Now, some people can do that. I can't do it. I think it's something that you've got to find yourself.
You find your way, you find your place.
Yeah, and in talking to you know, songwriters that, you know, some of the local I call Newfoundland songwriters like Barry Canning and Terry Penny, who I think is really, really good lyricist. Of course, Ron Hines, who's really good. I'm really starting to appreciate his work more since he passed, interestingly enough. And the list goes on. And you hear a lot of the new ones like Steve Lawrence and Greg Bulger and a lot of these guys that are churning out just great songs. And Newfoundlanders right now, and with Valley Radio, I'm starting to hear, because we're encouraging the local Newfoundland artists to send in material, I'm starting hearing some really great stuff. And we're having a chat, and where'd you get the idea for this, right? Oh, I got this idea for this, to do this. And a lot of it, what I'm finding, is that it's coming from personal experiences. And you do learn a craft. You know that a song has to start with, it's got to catch somebody with the opening, and it's got to have a good, you know, simple, it's got to have a good chorus, it's got to have a good bridge. So there's things that fundamentally you have to put in there, but how do you do it, and interesting things to make it
Well, this is it. Let's talk craft for a minute, because, you know, we've talked, and I would be much like you. I'll get a line or I'll think, and I have read that keeping a journal, if you have the thought, get it down, because as you say, you can forget it. You know, you get a download and it comes in and this is good, and a memo, you make a memo or whatever, but you have to get that down while let's say while it's there. But craft, where, you know, I sat down one day and said, I'm going to write a song. I had some ideas and I'm working on it, and I was struggling. I was like, I don't really know how to put this together. How many beats? How long should that be? You know, how do you make that work? Then you put the chords to it. There's a fair bit to it.
Yep, there is a fair bit to it, but I mean, you've got to let it, for me anyway, I've got to let it come to me. I can't force it. Like Stephen King can sit down, and he's got himself this one, it works for him. And he can sit down and do it. That's why I say I don't know how to write a song, because I don't think there is one way to write a song. I think everybody's a little bit different. The only advice I'd give to songwriters, and it's what I've heard, is that you know, you keep a journal, you write down little things, little lines, and a line that might fit, you might say, oh, here, that would fit here. You know, sometimes it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. But write for personal experiences, I find, are oftentimes the better songs. For me, I said this a few times, and they said, sit down and write a love song. I can't sit down and write a love song. Some people can. I can't do it. To sit down like Air Supply or Paul McCartney, you know, My Love and stuff, I just can't do it. I'm just not that romantic, I guess.
Oh, I'm sure you're romantic. We'll do a poll on that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't think my wife would agree with that very much. She said, no.
Well,
but
we'll check.
I can't, you know, none of my songs are really what I call love songs.
Yes. Okay.
Some people can write them just like that. I'm not one of them. I got to use something from my, you know, from my life. And which was one of the songs after the first album, which was one of the first songs that I wrote, and that was Tale of Two Cities. And of course, grew up here in Grand Falls-Windsor, but I was on the Windsor side, and used to live by the railway track. And that song was, I'm kind of really proud of that song, because that song came about, and it's funny how you remember, I remember my father had this saying, and he passed away. It's funny how you remember what they said when they were alive, more so sometimes than
when they're with you.
You don't appreciate them until they're gone, type thing. And I remember him telling me a story about somebody that worked in the paper mill with. And he had like 13, 14 kids, and his wife was pregnant again, so they're tormenting him, saying, you know, can you keep it in the holster there, you know, because, you know, how many kids do you have? And he said, well, and he lived by the train track. And he said every morning the train used to come by at 5 o'clock in the morning and wake us up. And it was too early to get up and too late to go back to sleep, so he had to pass time doing something. So I remember that, and that's where the line that started the song is, daylight comes and a train whistle blow, many a child were conceived in that way. And that's where that idea, so sometimes you get all of these ideas that come just, and I wrote the song around that. And then when I had that line, I really liked it. I said, I want to talk about myself growing up, what it was like to live when I was growing up. It was, because it's different than it is now. You know, we didn't spend our time on a computer.
No.
We spent our time, you know, out playing with other kids. And, you know, and our parents, you know, they had bread, peanut butter, and jam, and it was just like a swarm of locusts would descend on everybody's house at certain times and, you know, just wipe out 4 or 5 loaves of bread, and then we're gone out again to play. It was just, we didn't stop. We're kids today. I mean, they're on their computers. I mean, when we were growing up, and I'm sure you're the same way.
Oh, same way.
You're punished by being kept in, not allowed out. The other way around now. You're punished by being sent in because it get you off your computer. You know, it's the other way around.
It is the other way, and that is a whole other story, isn't it? It's an issue.
But that becomes, I think, fuel for a song.
A song.
And sometimes, you know, and actually there's a song that I'm working on now that kind of has that feel. That's why I brought it up.
Well, I think personal experience is where it does begin, and quite often it does with any form of writing. There's something in there that draws your attention.
Yeah.
There's a connection. And then it's when the imagination gets going. Where am I going to go with this? What's the meaning? But then you almost want to make it universal. I mean, do you write songs for only yourself when you're writing, or do you think, well, who's going to like this? Who's going to listen to this? Does that go through your head?
I didn't expect anybody to like any of it, to be honest with you. When I wrote, and how GTs Lounge started, I had a couple of songs, and I knew a guy by the name of Clint Curtis. He used to be in Max 80, and I used to actually do a lot of sound production for them. And I heard Greg Bolger's album, and I thought, where was this recorded? And I was shocked when I seen it was recorded in Springdale with Clint. So I contacted Clint, and from that we went over, and I just had a couple of songs that you know I've been playing for years. I wanted to get something on, even just for myself, something recorded.
Right.
And surprised when we did it, he went, man, these are great, right? What else you got?
Just what you want to hear.
Really? Well, you know, he was doing it because he has a studio too.
Sure,
Call
but
it what
still,
it was.
it's
but,
nice
you know,
to
I
hear.
started. Then he said, "Okay, we'll work on this now." And when it started coming back, it was like, "Okay, I like that." Still, you don't expect. I don't know if there's an artist yet that goes out there that, especially when they first go out, think that there's anybody else going to like it, and they're always shocked. And so you can imagine my surprise when I started getting emails from radio stations and things in the UK and Norway and places like that were saying, great, you know.
I can't imagine your surprise, because that wouldn't have been in your, I wouldn't think it would be in your thought process. It wouldn't be in mine.
In Great Britain, my song's being played in radio stations like Radio Caroline and Quasar and all these in Great Britain, and of course in Norway, and Radio Caroline is a huge station. in Europe because it was one of the first pirate stations that sort of broke rock and roll.
Pirate Radio.
Pirate Radio.
I love that movie, by the way.
Well, that was based on them.
Yeah,
And they were in the middle of the
such a
English
great
Channel because the BBC
Yeah.
wouldn't allow them to play rock and roll. So they went out in the middle of the English Channel and did a legal pirate broadcast.
Yeah.
And so when they picked it up and it started spreading over in Europe and in France and in other places, I mean, imagine my surprise that even one of the radio stations, which was Quasar, voted it one of the top albums in 2014. So for a person here that wasn't 25 anymore, who was doing this because, well, I was wanting to do it, so do something. I mean, that was a shock to me. And then they started asking for the second one, and now they're saying, when's the third one coming? And so it's kind of, you get encouraged to do that. But for me to sit down and write songs, it's got to come to me. My wife hears all my songs before anybody else. She's oftentimes, she's in bed and she sort of hears them. She comes down, I kind of like that because I'm playing it over and over, trying to, to flesh it out. And she hears a lot of the songs before anybody else hears them. And she hears them in the rawest form.
She's your first listener.
Yeah, but she never says anything usually. And there's a couple of songs she said, King of the No Minds. I really like that one, that's really catchy. I was like, you are listening, because I didn't know she was, right? Because I was working on the first one, it was only a couple. And she was really skeptical, you're going to do a record. When are you, you're going to be Tom Petty now, are you?
Oh, why not? I mean, come on, I'm sure she's a fan now.
Yeah. And she'll, she'll say, yeah, I like this, but she won't go, I guess she wants to swallow my head or whatever.
There you go.
But at this point in the game, I'm not into my 20s or 30s anymore.
Yes.
This is just something I always wanted to do, and it's sort of taken on a life of its own. I had financial resources to do it. So, I mean, I think in life, and as I said to you in the interview before, I don't think is what you regret what you didn't do. You don't regret what you did. You regret what you didn't do.
Yeah.
And which is a line that somewhere got to be in a song somewhere.
Well, there you go. That is a good line, and that's so true. And maybe there's some people out watching this that are thinking, I'm going to write a song. I'm going to do it.
And for too many years, I sort of had the inferiority complex.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it because, this person said this, or whatever. Oh, maybe somebody won't like it. You got to be true to yourself too. At some point, and say, I want to do this, and you asked me the question, do I go out and see if anybody else is going to like it? I kind of don't. I kind of say, well, I'm going to write this until I like it, because at the end of the day, you really got to be proven to yourself. And if you go out and you write for yourself that you're happy with it and you're satisfied with it, whether these albums sell 1 copy or 10 million, it's still a success to me because it did it. And I think too many people have the inferiority complex of saying, I don't think I could do that, or whatever it is, whether we're making records or write a book or whatever they want to do. I think we got to get over that.
That can be quite a hurdle. It can really hold people back. It can, almost be a form of a block.
Yeah.
And you hear writer's block, and it can just hold you from starting and just doing it, and then being judged. The thought that someone's going to look at your song and say, or listen to your song, I should say, but who is he to think he can write that? But hey, you are you. And I think focusing on what you're thinking, your happiness with the song, I think is really good advice.
Yeah, just do it and please yourself, and hope that hope other people will like it. Not everybody's going to like it. I don't like every song that.
No,
some songs that are really popular, and I go, that's not me. I don't like that, or I'm not keen on that. Do I respect the person that did it? Absolutely. Anybody who sits down and wants to write a song has my respect right away. Whether the masses appreciate it, I'm not selling mass amounts, but I'm satisfied with it that, okay, I'm kind of proud of that, or I like that myself. Hopefully other people will like it. But I think people need to get over the inferiority complex and just do it because you want to do it. And you please yourself first. Because if you please yourself first and say, okay, I'm okay with that, then hopefully other people will like it, and sometimes they will.
What about genres? Would that help somebody going into songwriting? I guess you write what you like to listen to. If you like country music or rock, basically you would. I mean, you're going to write what you like to hear.
Yeah.
So that might be a starting point even. Are there formulas for, remember the old country songs, the Tammy Wynette, the George Jones, and they always had this story. I mean, I hated that stuff back when, if somebody said country music, I'd be like, ugh, I love country music. It went through somewhat of a transition to get me as a fan.
Well, country music now is what the Eagles and Leonard Skinner were back in the 70s.
Yeah.
That's what country music has become now.
Seems so much
Yeah.
more, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's very, like, you take Shania Twain and people like that, they really brought it mainstream.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, just I don't sit down and try to write a song about any particular, when things come out. And I've said this before, it's what comes out. I don't know where it comes from, other than I'll say, I have an idea, I think it's coming from this or that. I really don't sit down and say, I'm going to write a tender ballad or anything like that. It's what comes out, and then I sort of, like making something, and I start, I'm baking a cake, and I'm starting to put the icing and everything else on. And when it's finished, I say, okay, now, there's been songs on both albums. Well, that's sort of a more country flavor sound. That's more of a rock flavor sound. Sometimes, you know, with the second album, when I sort of had my head space in there, I sort of said, I like to do, because when I did GTs Lounge and we used to play it in the band, we used to do some shows, it just felt like the show itself sort of lacked something. We needed a bit more excitement. And I didn't want to add any other, you know, other songs into it. So when I sat down and started writing for Living Chains, which, you know, once again, different songs came at different times, I said, but write it from a perspective that, okay, a band playing it live. So if you get your mind in that sort of sense and say you write the songs that way, and that's why, you know, Fantasy became what it came, and Wine, Women and Song became more of a free Bad Company type thing. But I like that kind of stuff. So I think when you sit down and write, all the people that you've listened to and you've liked, and sometimes, you know, you will sort of, not steal, that's not the right word.
I know what you're
You'll let that
saying.
influence really come in.
Yes.
And
yeah.
I mean, Wine, Women and Song is sort of, it is shamelessly, is not copying a lick, but is saying, okay, a lick what maybe this guy would come up with.
Ah, yeah.
And that was like a Bad Company, a free, because, you know, Paul Rogers, I'm a big fan of Paul Rogers. I kind of said, well, why don't I have something like that, something like the All Right Now song, All Right Now, that one. And so Wine, Women and Song was sort of, I want to have something like that. Now, I don't know if it succeeded, but it became a song that's probably the one that the band likes to play the most when we play live. It sort of really moves a lot. So
Well,
it's just a mindset you get.
I mean, keeping it original, I mean, you know, once you start and you're writing, and to have, like I say, bring a different feeling into a song, you've got to get some ideas and stimulation from somewhere. And it's normal that we would look at something, say, I like that feel, I like that rhythm, I want to do something with that. But then again, all songs are, you know, very much original in most cases. You hear about a few lawsuits now and then.
Yep, if you're directly copying it, and that can get tricky.
It can, no doubt. But, you know, the challenge, I guess, is how do you keep it fresh? How do you feel, you know, that your chords you use, you probably fall into certain patterns of chords you like. You probably fall into certain ways you like to approach it. Then how do you keep it fresh?
That's a really good question, because a lot of songs.
I love the answer to that one, if you can provide it.
Yeah, I generally will come up with I'll come up with, as I say, I come up with a chorus in that first, and then I'll generally write the chord pattern around that chorus. If that chorus happens to be a G, D, and C, so be it. There's some songs that, you know, you'll sit there and you go, okay, the G, C, and D. Okay, maybe now if we change the key to it, it becomes higher or lower, wherever it needs to be. So, you know, you get, I'm more concerned about get the rough idea down first. Get the basic chords that you want in. Sometimes you can take it, but there's other songs that, you know, have totally different chord patterns, completely different that, you know, but, you know, in music you sort of learn what goes together. So I oftentimes will try to write the chord, have the chord pattern to fit what you're putting in, not the other way around. That's what works for me, is that, you know, sometimes I'll come up with a riff, which was Wine, Women and Song, but, you know, okay, then I built the song around the riff, but then I had the chords to fit what I was, what the, you know,
what you were thinking
in my head, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, a lot of times people get, you know, I've got to do chord patterns, I've got to have all these kind of stuff. Right, you know, as anybody who's playing guitar and become half decent at it will find, okay, that really the C doesn't sound right, maybe the A minor will sound right, or if K is an A minor. But I mean, I have some certain ways that I do things, like A minor sounds fine to me, but I oftentimes will play A major 7, which just takes one finger off, that's it.
That's right.
And sometimes that sounds prettier, right? So I oftentimes will try to make the chord pattern suit what I'm trying to sing. And I think there was one of the guitar player plays was Brad said, you write a lot of songs in G. I guess because that's where my voice is comfortable.
Right. I think you do kind of go where your voice is
Yeah,
comfortable.
and you have
Anyone can transpose it to whatever key they
Oh, yeah,
so
well,
wish, right?
With a guitar is great because
The
guitar,
capo.
the capo, yeah, brings
The
it up and brings it down.
simple way to do it, of course,
yeah.
but you know, and then there's bar chords. But if you want to keep it simple, capo.
A capo is, and I use a capo quite a bit, and some people will say, you know, and sometimes you listen to
They
people.
say that's
sometimes
cheating?
yeah, and I say, well, okay, if that's cheating, James Taylor does it, Valdi does it, numbers other, and if James Taylor can do it and Valdi can do it,
Then I can
then
do it.
boy, why can't
Well,
I?
you
That's
know,
what I do.
When we sat down, we were thinking, gee, how are we going to, this is a show about, you have no idea how to write a song, and
No.
we've almost used up all our time, and before we do run out of time, I do want to just quickly tell us you've got another CD in the works?
I'm starting, I've got some songs written for a new one, and generally how it does, I mean, I'll write it, and then I'll record it on, you know, and then finally I get to a part that I've got it long enough that it's a very rough version. And then I'll take it. And the studio I work with is Seven View Studios in Springdale.
In Springdale.
And that's Clint Curtis and Steve Clark's studio. And I found, and that's one of the other secrets too, that I think that a lot of people, you're going to go out and write and try to do songs, you know, having good people who are talented. And for me, Clint Curtis has been godsend. Because I bring songs over and, you know, he goes, okay, all right. And he might even say, maybe if you change this a little bit here.
So there you go.
And I always equate it to, sometimes I get, every now and then, I went over a couple of songs and I'm stuck. I'm stuck. And with Jesse off the first album was like that. And I was like, I'm stuck. And he went, why don't you go, Jesse, where are you going? And it's all he had to say, that it would seem like you're stuck in a snow or something.
Yeah.
And somebody gives you a push and then you can go.
Well,
that's what I kind of needed, and he's been great for that.
Well, there you go, and I mean that's talent right here in central Newfoundland.
Oh, yes,
and
absolutely.
so much talent. But Tom, I want to thank you for taking the time to come in
my
and
pleasure.
do this. And I think we could fill another half hour. I'm pretty sure that we could, couldn't we? And these are available now on
They're
Apple
on
and
iTunes. They're, you know, most of them are on iTunes. Of course, you get them on my website.
They're your website. Can we have that before we wrap?
Yeah, it's tompinsent.com.
Perfect.
That's
okay.
it, pretty simple. And well, GTs Lounge is pretty well sold out. There's still fair copies of Living Chains, and I'm hoping to get out and do some more playing. But Valley Radio is taking up a lot of my time these days.
Of course.
And of course, I'm getting radio play. But so are a lot of Newfoundland artists, and we continue to build that. But I'm going to dust the band are saying to me, when are we going to get going? When are we going to get going? But very soon we're going to fire up because we've got a good band, all local musicians, and we're doing things going to be local. And we're going to get out and do some shows over the summer and the fall.
Well, we'll be watching for you.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts
It's been my
today.
pleasure.